You might be in a spot where you relate to being in that really dark place. There is a way out of it. And the way out of it is to take ownership for your own life. And that ownership for your own life is a process of uncovering and accepting the actual truth of who you are, and then manifesting the truth of who you are into the world. And the people who see you and are meant to be with you will stay, and the people who aren't will have to move.
Tyler, here we are. Excited for this topic because it's been a hot one in my groups. But before we get in, I kind of want the audience, for those who haven't listened to your podcast or know much about kind of the work that you guys do, can you just introduce yourself real quick and give them a little story as to how you guys got into this work and why it matters and what you guys do?
Yeah, you bet, man. We're so glad to be here with you today. Yeah, so Brandon and I, Brandon's my brother, we're the co-hosts of the Therapy Brothers podcast, and we kind of got into it from different angles. Brandon got into it from a business kind of angle. He's an economics major, and then he went to school and he was looking around and going, man, what needs are there that I could be good at? And then he was kind of led into the therapy kind of world, and he got an LCSW. And at the same time, I was getting my LMFT. And what he didn't know was that I was going through my own hell, my own recovery process, where I am the betrayer, if you want to use that word. I know you don't like using that word. And so I was doing my own work silently behind the scenes without him knowing. And then he called me one day and was like, hey, Tyler, we need to niche into this specific thing because nobody's really touching it. There's only this one kind of way that I'm being trained right now. And I think that there's a real need and a real place. So we came together and started doing this work. And now we do a show where we just talk to real people about their own real stuff and, try to help them. So that's what we do.
Yeah. And for the audience, it's the Therapy Brothers podcast. And yeah, you guys have done a pretty good job. The show's grown pretty tremendously. So congratulations with that. So yeah,
thanks, man.
Now and just for the audience, is it infidelity specific? Just talk to them about what you guys talk about on the show.
Yeah, I would say almost our whole population is couples who are trying to figure out whether or not they're going to stay together after infidelity or cheating, or it crosses into the realm of sexual addiction stuff too. But it's really about overcoming infidelity.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clear that up. So for the listeners, because at least the episodes I've listened to, which I've listened to a good amount of them, I wouldn't say it's your traditional sex addiction podcast. It's more, it's definitely a relational dynamic after infidelity. And I think for my population, my guys aren't necessarily addicted. I would say most of them fall into a compulsive category. I think I actually like your podcast because I do think for my guys, I think having so much emphasis on the addiction sometimes is I don't know, unnecessary. It's I think looking at it just as infidelity, I think sometimes is better. I think again, you know me, anytime we pathologize a problem and call it things, I don't think it helps. I actually think it makes it worse, which bleeds us into what we wanted to talk to today. So Tyler and I were talking, I guess that was this week. And a topic that I've been really passionate about recently is the concept of identity. Now, not to get in, and it's a very big topic, but if I had to summarize it for the listeners as it applies to sex addiction and infidelity and betrayal, basically the concept of identity is it's your sense of self. Okay. And a lot of people don't know that it's a concept, but it is a mental construct. It just is. When a baby is born, the baby does not know what it is. It doesn't care what it is. It just puts stuff in its mouth and makes noises, and it's totally fine being that. It's not until, can't remember what age, but basically they start to form the sense of identity as they start growing up. And then they have this idea of, oh, I am shy. Oh, I am fat. Kids don't like me. And so we start to develop a story about ourselves. So where I'm going with this is, this happens also through our lives and our adulthood, right? We're collecting data from our tribe, society, and that data matters a lot. As tribal creatures, what they think of us and what they call us really, really matters. It's why I'm so sensitive around words that are used. It's why at 12-step, the guys always kind of looked at me funny, some with annoyance. When it came around, everyone said, "Hey, I'm Bill, I'm a sex addict. Hey, I'm Tom, I'm a sex addict." It would come to my turn, and I would say, "Hi, I'm Roland. Happy to be here," because I am Roland. And that's what I am, and I'm Roland. I'm not anything other than that. So, Tyler, before we get into really, I want to really focus on kind of the harm of identity when you're in recovery in general, or therapy in general. I wouldn't even say this is a sex addiction specific thing or an infidelity specific thing. I think anytime that you're going to therapy, I think the sensitive nature of that work is very identity driven work. But anything that I left out in terms of defining identity so that the audience can kind of understand what we're talking about before we get into the kind of sex addiction betrayal dynamic of it?
No, I think you're spot on. The one thing that I would say is you're probably already familiar with this, but there's some pretty new research out that talks about the way that we label ourselves in the recovery process. And the new research is saying that those who label themselves as addicts tend to recover less quickly and less effectively than those who don't. And
Yes.
so there's something to that, what you're talking about. If I see myself as blank, that almost sets in stone what that then means. And all of us have different ideas of what an addict is, I guess, but most of us have a negative connotation about it. And then we kind of tend to prove ourselves right based off of what we've accepted as pieces of our identity.
Yeah. And it's the way I see it is, I almost see men recovering inside of the identity. And so in the way you can't escape it, right? So like if you are a sex addict, you're a betrayer, an abuser, you are a liar, then it's like you recover and you're doing the work, but you're doing it inside of that identity. So in many ways, you're not recovering in the sense of that word, right? A recovery would be escaping and leaving behind that identity and returning back to ideally a place of authenticity, something that feels more integrity driven, right? And so again, I think that's the danger of pathologizing and labels is, can you escape it? Right? Can you escape this thing that you've been assigned? And just for the high achieving men, listen to this, guys. This is, another way to kind of just leave the kind of therapy addiction world for a second. Think about other aspects of this, right? You are you're a lineman. You're our best lineman. You're the star running back. You are the valedictorian. You are, whatever you've been assigned. You're the class clown. You're the guy who barely skates through classes and gets C's and D's and barely escapes failing, right? Whatever role has been assigned to you, I bet you guys can think back to your life where you have this pressure that you feel to be, everyone always expects me to acquire 3 to 4 apartment complexes every year. So now, even though you really don't want to keep growing your portfolio, it's the only thing that everybody knows you as. So here you are collecting real estate because that's how everybody, in your mind, that's what everybody expects of you is to continue growing. So that was another way to kind of look at identity is basically people tell you something, you want to, you've taken it on, and now it defines your actions, defines how you think.
In a sense, what I'm hearing you say, Roland, is that we need to be careful with which identities are actually authentic to us, because when we accept any of those labels as part of our identity, they become, in some ways, the prison walls in which we operate. Right?
Yes. Yeah, it's your. I have a saying in our program. I always say you'll never outpace your identity. I also say identity is the gatekeeper. I mean, really, it's what you are. The power of I am. There's a reason. There's a book that talks about that. Right? It's the biggest power that we have. Right? I am really dictates what we do and how we show up in the world, and really kind of all of our actions and in many ways our thoughts that follow, right? You'll be confined to that. So let's dive into what this means for the dynamic. So the reason I feel so passionate about this is I'm not sure if you all have noticed, but despite our efforts, I wouldn't say that there's the relapse rate's high. I mean, let's just admit, let's just call it what it is. The relapse rate is high. I would say 80 to 90% of the guys who call me, this is their relapse. This is their second discovery. This is their second round, right? They're now asking their wife for a third chance. Okay. So let's call that out. And then, the more uncomfortable one. And I hate saying this because I don't want to manifest something into people's lives, but, couples have a really difficult time thriving after this. I mean, this is there's this narrative that you'll recover, and there's this common saying that the new marriage you're going to build will be better than the old marriage. I remember when I got into recovery, I started meeting couples who were deeper into this, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7. I'm like, hey, where are these happy ones everyone's talking about, right? I hear rumors of these, but I haven't seemed to be able to find one. And I think, Tyler, as I've hung around, what I really see as a massive barrier, and I'm reflecting on my wife and I and our experience through this as well. With my wife and I, it wasn't until we left behind the labels. I am not a betrayed partner anymore. I am who I am, me. And then for me, I am not a sex addict or a compulsive sexual individual or somebody with an intimacy. I'm rolling. And I just have the things that I have, and I have the wife I have, and I have the life I have. And it was when we really stepped into just being humans again. Everything just flourished. I want you to speak to that before we dive into kind of what people can do about it. But speak to that, because you've been affected by this as well personally.
Yeah, you bet. In fact, if it's okay with you, I'll just use some of my own story to illustrate some of the points that you're bringing up here. So this is something that I've been doing this work for about 20 years, and I feel like you hit on something that a lot of people don't hit on. And for me, my own personal story was that when it all broke loose, it was that classical thing where I was now the addict. I was the person who was never going to be one who could be trusted again. And the truth is I blew my wife's world up a little bit with my lying and my hiding, and it rocked her world. And she struggled a lot with trying to figure out trust. And I would do everything I thought I was supposed to do as a good boy to make sure that she was never upset again, that I'd bend over backwards to make sure that I was managing her feelings for her. And I thought I was building trust the whole time. And in reality, she was resenting me more, and she was seeing me as more weak and more small the more that I did it. And she had a moment driving home from work one day where she was just really obsessing about how badly I've hurt her and how terrible it was and what a victim she was. And then for some reason, she had a biblical story come into her mind, the Good Samaritan, and it hit her. And she said, oh, wait a second, I'm one of those people that walked right by the guy who was beat up on the street. And I'm now currently part of the people beating him up. And so she came into the house that day, and I was still in my victim mode, like, oh, I suck so bad. I was crumpled up in the shower, like being all emotional and crying. And she walked in and she grabbed me by the face and she said, hey, Tyler, like what you've done to me has devastated me and it's hurt me, and I can't stay if you keep doing these things. But I think you're a good man, and I want to stay if you can figure out how to deal with this stuff. And whoa, like there was like a total shift that started to take place in the energy of what we were doing, right? It was always this heavy, dark fear and shame-based energy. And I started to realize my whole life has to change with the energy with which I'm living. And I had to start living with an energy of possibility. And then the language you're using is the language we use too, is moving from a place of I'm not to a place of I am. Mm-hmm. And starting to accept the truth of everything that I am, my weaknesses that I'm going to be willing to work on. And the things, my wife was actually married to a really good guy even before D-Day. Mm-hmm. But I thought my good guy was the performance mm-hmm. to protect from being seen as the bad guy, because I thought I was the bad guy, right?
Well, speak to that though, because there is this mantra within the sex addiction field and betrayal trauma field that, and the therapists certainly, especially on podcasts, the therapists certainly contribute to it and play into it. They say, "Oh, the old marriage is dead," right? So there's this. I'm sure you've heard it, right? It's like, she wants nothing to do with that, and there's almost this like she's right. The old marriage was dead. Her whole life was a lie. And I understand from the trauma standpoint that is what, my wife always said all that, right? Not wearing my wedding ring, not celebrating the anniversary, all this. But I want you, as a marriage and family therapist and somebody in this space who works with couples, to speak to that a little bit, because again, I think I hear that, and from a trauma standpoint, it's definitely something that men need to learn to hold and honor, because that is their experience, right? Everything's a lie up to this point. But I want you to, as a therapist, to come in here and speak to that a bit, though, because if that's the case, the thing that always has not sat right with me is, what effect does that now have then on healing the marriage? Because if the marriage is for nothing and the whole thing was a lie up to this point, again, I wonder the effect that has. Because I think I always ask myself, what's the goal here? Is the goal to gain empathy? Is the goal to not get divorced? Is the goal to have him suffer and feel remorseful? But what are we accomplishing? Because to me, I thought the goal was for us to heal and thrive as a couple.
Yeah. So you're hitting something, Roland, that I think is, especially when things get really big and painful, we want to think in all or nothings, black and whites, because that's the easiest way to utilize our energy.
Especially
and so
trauma.
it's like, your wife's been betrayed. And so of course she's like, I can never trust you again. Everything you did was a lie. And if you go in right then, guns a-blazing, and be like, no, it's not, like, you're going to like actually amplify the experience. And so it's kind of a weird dance that seems to take place where the men that I work with, deep inside, they want to be empathetic to their wives. They want to be there to provide for them emotionally. They want to be there to be stable and secure. And so they have to learn those skills of empathy and understanding, while at the same time not taking on the identity as the one down position in the relationship forever, because that destines the relationship to never being able to go beyond a certain point. And the certain point that those couples get to is what they would call safety, but it sucks. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just not a fun place to live, where my partner always has to be making up for the problem over and over again. And so it does take time. Like, there needs to be time for grieving. There needs to be time for anger. There needs to be time for healing. And there needs to be a space for that, with some patience, with an understanding that at the end of the day, if we choose to stay together, we are choosing to have something more than what this can provide for us. And there does need to be that look towards the future of who are both of us becoming, what is both of our identity, and how does that merge together? And if we both go on a journey of systematically accepting, I call it a pathway to radical self-acceptance. Two people who go on a pathway to radical self-acceptance, they build a marriage and a relationship with each other that has vulnerability and depth and understanding and support and authenticity, where other places get stuck in that bogged down place of, well, you hurt me, and because you've hurt me, I will never trust. And because I can never trust, you have to be in the one down position the rest of your life. So if you're in that position where you've been the one who's done the betraying, you have an interesting fine line to walk, where you want to be sensitive, understanding, empathetic, and you need to be able to hold your structure and your framing a little bit in terms of, I love my wife beforehand.
Yeah. Well, and I have a question, and you're going to hate this question, but I have to ask it because as a podcaster, I know every single listener is wanting me to ask you this. And you're going to kill me because it's the worst question to ask a therapist ever. But timeline, I mean, truly, like, that's what guys are always wondering, is like, I get that I have to, there's a process, a grieving process, an anger process, this is a massive trauma for most women. They will tell you this is the biggest trauma, and they can't even fathom a larger one. It truly, like, just is the biggest hurt that they can think of, right? So we have to honor that, and then to your point though, but I have to ask, like, when do we know, when are we crossing into a unhealthy and borderline abusive relationship where these two people just aren't acting like partners? I mean, this ain't going to work. I mean, where is that line, and what time? Now, I know it's a crummy question, because it really depends on, did the guy get his shit together fast enough or not? Because I have some guys in my group who butchered this whole process, and they're like, oh, I'm a year in this. I'm like, brother, you haven't even started. I mean, it's a miracle she's still with you. So anyways, it's a dreaded question, Tyler, but like, as much as we are trying to graduate to a place of tenderness and coming together, because it's really going to be the only thing that's going to heal the marriage, just give the audience you don't have to say a timeline, because again, I think that's inappropriate, but can you help answer that question without necessarily giving them any sort of specifics on, hey, when do we need to start coming together as a couple, rather than, really beating this marriage into the ground to a point where it becomes really difficult to crawl out of?
Yeah, well, I think, let me try to answer it this way, and then I can also give you just some straight up answers if you want them. I think we allow ourselves to be treated right up to the level we believe we should be treated. And so I'm going to extend the misery in my marriage the longer I stay in the position of believing that I should be beat up over it. And so if I start doing my own personal work and start moving from a place of I'm not to that place of I am that I'm talking about, and I start realizing, you know what, I like what I see in the mirror. I have a lot to offer the world. I can offer my wife my strength right now. I can take accountability for the things that I've done. I can be patient and forgiving, but I'm not going to tolerate being, what all the stories that you hear, things thrown at me or names called or labels assigned. I'm going to set some boundaries around those things while still also offering my presence to my spouse. And if I start stepping into that more quickly because I believe I'm worthy of being treated a certain way, not like defending my supposed honor, ego style, but more like, no, like, I'm not helping my wife or myself if I continue to tolerate her calling me names. Mm-hmm. She'll go to war with me even more because she'll hate herself for calling me the names. And then I'm going to agree with it. And I'm going to reinforce her continuing to do that. And both of us are going to be more miserable for longer. So if I love her, I should love myself enough to say, hey, I can see you're hurting, but I'm not going to continue the conversation unless we change the tone here, right? Now, that a betrayed partner is hearing what I'm saying right now, and I'm not doing this to trigger you or say your pain's invalid. It is okay. It's valid. But your partner showing up in strength and according to true principle will actually feel safer and provide trust faster, and couples heal more quickly when that individual process is happening, right? So in terms of timelines, like, I don't know what I look for, and this is what I love the moment when this happens, and this usually happens anywhere from a few months in to maybe around a year or so with a betrayed partner. They'll come into my group or my office and they'll be like distraught and they'll say, I got to stop coming. And I'm like, okay, why? What's going on? And they'll say, I know that my partner is in real recovery. Like, there's a different energy. They're showing up different. There's more accountability. There's more humility. There's even an effort at empathy. And I'm like, that's awesome. And then they're like, yeah, but the problem is that I don't feel any better.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I'm like, hallelujah. Now we can go to work on your side of things.
Right. So everybody hear what Tyler just said. That was so articulated so beautifully, because Tyler, you nailed it. There is this turning point. Like you said, for some it can happen. I think my wife hit it pretty early. I was really fortunate. She really recognized that I cannot create safety for her. I cannot make her feel beautiful. I cannot make her feel cherished. I cannot, I can certainly do things to help her reinforce the story that to make all those things worse. But ultimately, she recognized that the only person who was going to make her feel safe, the only person who was going to trust me was her. There really was truly nothing I could do on my end to restore any of those feelings. And I was very fortunate. I think she flipped into that at month 3 or 4. But did everybody hear that? So it's when that milestone is reached that that things start to become very healthy, because now the two individuals really taking ownership over their reality. And that, anybody who knows anything about EFT, that's really why EFT works so well, is what's your reality? What's my reality? And we both care, right? It's this really bonding experience, but it's tough before that. Now, one thing I want to add is, how do we create an environment for the partners to get into a safe place where they can get there? That is where, guys, there is a lot on you there. She needs to see willingness. She needs to see change. She needs to see, effort, energy, enthusiasm. She needs to see empathy and attempts at empathy. She needs to see ownership. Right? So there's a ton of things that the partners need to see for them to get to a place where they can be like, okay, crap, he actually is putting in the work, but I still feel terrified that every single day, and my hurt's just as deep as it was on day one. And here we are, 12 months into this thing, right? So I know we made it sound like it was the switch that the partners had. Guys, I would say there's a ton of stuff that you need to do for her to get to a point where she can have the aha moment of, okay, he is putting in the work, but I don't feel better, right? I wanted everybody to see that. Yes, it is a switch in her, but it's also this recognition on her end that you are trying as hard as you can to change yourself and fix the marriage. So well articulated, Tyler. But I got to ask then about this one up, one down thing, because I frankly don't like it. And my wife's an LMFT as well, and her schooling says that the therapist should never actually condone such a thing. That putting one partner over another partner there's never an appropriate place for that. However, within the sex addiction community, as you know, that is something that, again, it's on podcasts and the rationale that they say is, oh, well, because he was lying, he was in the one up. So therefore, this is her turn to get the slight one up until we can get through crisis. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's a little tick for tack, and it kind of goes against what we know about sound relational psychology. I would like you to speak to that as an LMFT. Why would we do that? Because again, I don't know if that dynamic does any favors for their identities going forward. I think it's really where a lot of the resentment and contempt starts to brew.
Yeah, that's a great thought. As I think about that in the industry, the whole overall industry, I think where you're going, Brandon, if you ever listen to our podcast, Brandon tees off on one particular program a lot because he has history with them. And they do this very thing where they put the spouse in like victim mode. He's an abuser. And then they just drive that home. And pretty soon it's just like, there's no place to go. So I think why it happens, and I'm not sure it's like done intentionally, is that there does need to be some level of sensitivity to the process that the spouse is going to go through that's been betrayed, where she's going to have her world spin for a while. She's not going to be able to find grounding all the time. There's going to be the big waves of fear and anger and sadness and devastation and loss of hopes and dreams. And I think a good therapist is able to actually balance both, where they can be there to provide a safe container and some validation and understanding for the process of that grieving, while also attending to the person who's done the betraying and saying, hey, you can't live in this I suck for the rest of your life. You're actually hurting yourself. Like, we have to figure out how to start helping you grow into a different energy while we're attending to the partner. And a lot of times maybe that feels like, or maybe it's purposely done, that, hey, we need to attend to the broken, betrayed spouse first and then leave this other person over here to just kick them around for a while, because then justice can be served and then it'll be all better. I don't agree with that approach either, Roland. I do see where it can easily turn into that, though.
I think it's, sorry to interrupt, but I do think you said it so well right there. I think a lot of times it's done accidentally because, who worded it really well? Tammy Gustafson's called it the spotlight. And I really liked how she said that. The spotlight needs to be on her. That I really liked. I liked that saying, because it wasn't saying you need to tolerate abuse. It wasn't saying that she gets to call you names, break things, throw things. All of that's abuse. You don't. It doesn't matter. You never get the right to call someone something derogatory ever. It doesn't matter what they did to you. It's abusive. It just is. There are laws against it, actually, and there can be legal recourse. So it's not that's not tolerated. But the spotlight on her, I really like that, because she worded it nicely, because it wasn't talking about a power dynamic or you're less of a person because of what you did, or you owe me. Right, because that's a common one, right? Is like, oh, you better be on your A game for the next 20 years of marriage to make up for what you did. That's not going to be any fun for him to be in, and I think that's where we start to go. But to your point, I do think there are people. I know there are, because you can hear it in the podcasts. There are people that say that definitely frame it as you're this, you're that. Look at all this. Look at that. Here, let me show you all the facts of what you've done to her. And then there's basically like nothing done for his experience and his past and why he's even in this position. And that, again, that's a really tough place. That's a really tough place to live. And my own personal experience with it was similar to yours, Tyler. You sound like you like removed your spine, and I can't remove my spine. It's just not something I can do. I have no interest in that. I'd get divorced before I would do such a thing. But for me, it was really tough because I started resenting her for the way the marriage was, the way I would feel coming home, the way, and that's really what I'm talking about here. Is it's not. We're not trying to dishonor anybody's experience. I think that's the reason I'm always so hesitant to even say this. Is the second I say no, one up, one down, I'm all of a sudden accused of being unempathetic for the partner's experience, and that's not what I'm saying. I am pro thriving marriage, and I just want everybody to look at the Gottman's research, and you ask yourself, go look at that research, some of the best research in the field. You tell me, are we honoring what all of that research shows us about marriages who thrive and stay together? Because to me, I see us doing a lot of stuff through this process that's going to create the very things that the Gottmans say lead to a 95+% chance of divorce.
Yeah, and I would say you're right, Roland. I think I did take the spineless approach because I thought that's what a good man was supposed to do. Like that's what I had been taught, right? And it wasn't until, in our case, probably we got into like the safe place after a couple of years, but then it was like bumpy until around 7 years into recovery.
Well, and not to interrupt, but I think that's the reason the spineless approach, I think, is kind of forced upon it. And if you keep your spine, you're accused of being a narcissist. I do think it creates. I do think that power dynamic actually creates very quick safety. And I think it dramatically increases the percentage of marriages that are saved. The question is, to me, at what cost?
Yeah, and I think maybe that's the way I would view it, is that in my case, I got lucky because I didn't have all the resources and things that were out there. I was kind of tripping along doing it myself while I was also trying to be an addictions counselor, like such a hypocrite. So I kind of got lucked into it because my wife was the one who had the intuition to say, wait a second, like I can't continue to keep it this way. It doesn't work for me. In fact, I hate him more and more the more he plays small. Mm-hmm. And so I started to learn that shift. And then over the last, ever since we started kind of making the shift, and I started looking at myself and saying, I need to grow into the man that I was designed to be. And that might even mean having a few more boundaries with my wife that she'll push against and hate, but she'll also love. And I tell you what, when I started doing that kind of work with a different level of energy, which was the becoming energy, that's changed everything in our relationship. She'll come to me now and say like she feels way safer. She trusts me now again in a different kind of way, but it's like full trust. She's way more open with me. And I think she likes that I push back sometimes when I didn't used to, but I do it in a way that's still kind and loving. And yeah, you're spot on with that. But so I kind of view it more as like, it can be a stepping stone, but you can't get stuck there, because if you get stuck there,
Well, and that's why I almost wonder, why have it be if we see such a high percentage of people getting stuck there, which I see, I don't know if you see it, I see it, then why make it a stepping stone when I've seen other couples who did not use that as a stepping stone, and then we never had the risk of getting stuck there? I find it quite interesting. I have a lot of couples who will, the guy will meet me and they had a couple therapists that they had used before. The person had no idea what sex addiction or betrayal even was, and they just treated them like two human beings in a relationship. And it's always so interesting to me. All the traditional stuff they did not do. And then here's this couple doing so much better than so many of the couples who followed it. And that's where I kind of wanted to come back to this identity piece. So speak to that then. Why would a couple who does not follow the traditional kind of protocol that largely the field uses, and instead went and saw somebody and was just treated like two hurt people, somebody who hurt someone, somebody who were hurt by someone. What does, from an identity standpoint, Tyler, why would that couple come back to something that resembled a healthy marriage faster? Talk to me about that, because it goes against so much of what we know, right? It's like, oh, well, you didn't do this, you didn't write that letter, and you didn't go take that, why all of a sudden do we see them returning? Because I'm not going to say it was any easier, but I do see them returning to coupleship a lot faster. Go back to identity and tell me why that's happening.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. If you're going to the wrong places, you kind of get spoon-fed for longer than maybe is necessary, and maybe even supported in a way. Like, there are programs out there that the way that they keep you in the program is they continue to tell you how broken you are and how wrong it was. Right. So if you stay there a long time, you can kind of get addicted to that, and it can feel true because your feelings are valid, but it just keeps you stuck.
Oh, for a betrayed partner, man, you kidding me? You put her in a room of a bunch of people talking about the injustice of this. How is that not supposed to make you upset? Because it's pretty ugly to look at, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. Is you want to find, I think you want to find the right resources where there's a space to have your feelings and to be held and allowed to process. We talk about it being a both and all the time with our clients on both the men and the women side of things. Of, you need someone to hear you and hold you and to call you up. You need both at the same time. And a lot of places only do the hearing and holding, and they don't do the calling up
too. You can't have somebody telling you, reminding you of the injustice and not holding. To me, it needs to be the same person holding you tenderly and then calling you up. Would you not agree? Because I feel like the person calling you up can't do it without hearing you and holding you. And then the person hearing you and holding you is the person who's the best suited to call you up. Wouldn't you agree?
I think that would be ideal. I see this happen sometimes in, let's say my groups, where maybe one of them comes in and is like, going off, my husband, and then two or three of the ladies are like, me too. Like, oh my gosh, I want to beat him up for you, this, that, whatever. And then as the discussion progresses, maybe another couple of ladies in the group will be like, but have you also considered this, or maybe how you're contributing to your own misery here? And then that discussion in the whole group still becomes really powerful.
Sure. So the context, absolutely.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think you're right.
But same container, right?
Yeah.
And but it still comes back to what I was saying though, is it's a safe. Those women are in their group, so it's in an essence still they read the post, they were heard, they read the dialogue, right? And then because I think where it doesn't work is when someone's just trying to pull you up and out, and it's like, yeah, but you don't know what he did to me. And how he meant, and you don't know the continued lying, and of the time where he looked at me straight in the face and lied again, right? You don't know, and so that's why I do think you do need to know her story, because I don't know if she's going to let you say those.
That's 100%. You have to have trust and understanding in order to even have a little bit. We follow the principles of the anatomy of peace a lot, and it talks about real relationship leads to a little bit of correction. And if you don't have the real relationship, you can't correct. And
yes, well said.
That's kind of how it works. And to your previous question, something, and this is maybe, I'm thinking about my own experience as well as a lot of the people that I work with. You asked, how is it that couples that don't do the traditional thing might get better faster? And I would say there's definitely the factor of what kind of treatment you're getting. Right. But there's also another factor, which is a lot of times the people that come into like our office, let's say I have a nice guy come into my office. He by default is already putting himself in the one down position even before he got found out. And so there's a climb out of that hole just to get him thinking like, hey, dude, like you got to start seeing yourself as a real human being, as an equal, like. And so I think that process sometimes just takes time depending on who the individual is that comes into treatment. And if they're already used to the currency of this false humility of beat myself up till the end of time because that's what a good man does, that takes a lot of work to try to help start turning that ship. And it's even harder when he's also being told, you still need to learn empathy. And in his mind, empathy means humility, means I suck, means... And you have to help parse that out for them and say, empathy is presence. Empathy is strength. Empathy is emotional connection. It's not beat yourself up, and they don't grip that very well a lot of times when they come through the door.
So what I'm hearing you say, and check me if I'm right here, is through the efforts of pointing out what needs to change, that can be heard, in a container of self-improvement, that can be heard as, oh, wow, now I have another 24 things that I suck at. And so maybe being in a container where you're not, hey, here's this book and buy that book and fill out these 5 worksheets, the person's not necessarily collecting this inventory of how much they suck. And to your point, on the flip side, as a partner, right? Rather than, oh, hey, read all these books so that you can learn about how hurt you are. I think, is that what you're basically saying? Is in many ways, in some ways, being unplugged, you're staying more present with what's here now. Whereas the more and more you consume, you're almost collecting. Potentially, obviously, like to your point, it depends on the person. Some people don't take that stuff on. I am somebody who takes that on, right? So if you tell me I have an intimacy problem, an empathy problem, I'm just adding it all to the cache. And I'm like, okay, hey, what's next in the queue, right? And so for me, by the time I was 1 year in, it was just like, I felt like I just needed a college degree in sex addiction, right?
You already earned it.
Yeah. Yes. Is that, am I understanding that right? So by basically not being necessarily plugged into the lingo, they're potentially more here and now with what's actually going on, rather than having, because to your point, with not just beat the empathy thing, but I have heard people say, when he learns to empathize, then you will feel. And I really despise when I hear that, because I don't actually think that him learning how to empathize will bring trust back. I've seen tons of guys who have learned how to empathize, and we're pretty damn good at it actually before they met me, and their wife trusts them probably less than every other guy in the group. So I think statements like that and energy like that there is this linear path to healing, I do think sometimes can slow couples down, because it's like, well, I'm waiting for these 2 milestones because I've heard these in these podcasts. When in reality, I think if those milestones were never introduced, would they have continued along the healing continuum?
That's a good, and I would say there's probably factors that help with restoring trust. We talk about a trust equation, and probably don't have time to get into it today, but there's certain elements that tend to restore trust. But I think what you're saying is correct, that sometimes, and this is back to us as human beings thinking in black and white, we want the roadmap that means this step, means this step, means this step. And so once we hit empathy, now we're on to second base. And and it doesn't really work that way. It's more of like a series of principles that get built into the lifestyle of an authentic life. And that whole energy with those principles is what restores trust over time. And I think that whole, too many experts they want to think in that same black and white, which is, even us, we have our own healing journey where we put people through a series of challenges and talk through a series of principles and things. But we acknowledge that when you complete the healing journey, that's a series of principles that are to be adopted into lifestyle, rather than you're fixed now, you're done.
So Tyler, I already know you're going to agree to that. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I have a pretty high confidence you're going to agree with what I'm about to say. Wouldn't you say in your own marriage, would you not say that in hindsight, now looking back at all the things that were done to get you to a healthy place in relationship, would you not say that now, as I look back, it was just acquiring the skill set and the presence and the understanding and to be in a healthy attachment? Would you not say that in the end, all that work boiled down to my wife and I honoring our differences, honoring our shortcomings, and really finding out how to be healthily attached to each other, and also empathetic towards each other's and our just who we are as unique individuals. And, as I looked at all the skills we acquired, we finally got to a place where we were healthily attached. I didn't take on her shit. She didn't take on my shit. I never expected her anything ridiculous of her. She stopped expecting ridiculous things of me, and she understood my shortcomings and I understood hers. And we really started getting a lot of our needs met elsewhere, because we're like, this is going to be really hard for Roland to give me. I'm actually going to go get this from my friends. And she stopped expecting me to give it. And she knows I'm trying to give it to her more. But basically what I'm saying is it became this very healthy attached, healthy honoring of our unique life experiences and who we are. And we just dropped the expectations and all the crap. And all of a sudden we just started getting along like healthy people. I don't know if you agree or not, but it's just like, as I look back, that's really how it played out. It was not this step 1, 2, 3, 4, betrayal, recovery, poof, we're better. It was really sound, true relational psychology.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the whole topic we were on with identity earlier. If I look at just my own journey, as you were asking, I think for me, it was over time, it was a shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, where I now am a person who gets to grow and learn and become until I die. And my wife is also in the same boat. And we happen to choose to want to grow and learn together until we die, or until something else changes. But for now, that's where it's at. And for me, it was not just the learning of the skills. I think there is something to be said for learning skills and getting some education. And I think that education is good as long as it's used with a growth mindset. But people use the education with a fixed mindset, and then it becomes the recipe. And if the recipe doesn't get followed perfectly, then it's failure.
Yeah.
And so the skills are great. I think the shift in acceptance of self is what moved from fixed to growth. And that's really what changed everything. That's what helped restore trust faster. That's what helped us be on a journey together. Our marriage is now a spiritual journey of growth, rather than me needing to complete her or vice versa.
Yeah, well said. So well said. So Tyler, I'd love to end with just some calls to action for the couples listening to this, or the men listening to this, or the women listening to this. From this whole thing of identity and the messiness of this whole road, let's just both take a time and leave them with how to summarize really this whole podcast into some way that they can ponder and hopefully put into some useful action. I'll go first. What I would say is, if I had to have you guys take one thing away from Tyler and our discussion today, remember what you're doing. I mean, what are we doing here? Right? Are we, I always thought we were trying to create a healthy guy who was in integrity and, knew who he was and understood the difference between, pathological living and authentic living, right? That's what I thought we were doing. I thought we were trying to have him learn about you and learn what has done to you and how this feels and what would feel good, right? And then ultimately, I thought we were trying to thrive as a couple. I thought we were trying to get out of this suffering. I mean, it ages couples. I've watched them. I mean, it puts on, in 3 years, they'll age 15 years from the stress. I mean, life is too short for this. So I just would ask all the couples, what are we doing? What are we doing? Are we trying to just be a betrayed partner and a sex addict forever and check in and spy on people's stuff and monitor this and check that? And I mean, come on, that is just no way to live, in my opinion. So what I would just say back to the couples is, what are we doing here? To me, if you're going to make the decision to try to save this marriage, because it's going to be the hardest freaking thing you're ever going to do. To me, if you're going to embark on this journey and spend the money, I mean, it is going to cost a lot of money and spend the time. I would really just ask you, are you actually, look at the science. The Gottmans, like I said, go in the Gottmans and just look at what the Gottmans say about a healthy relation. Read Stan Tatkin's stuff and his, The Brain on Love, and just ask yourself, are we acting and working towards being a healthy couple? Or is there this justice crap going on and tick for tack and you need to do this and then I'll feel like, to me, when I look at that dynamic, I just see in marriage it's never going to thrive. I would just ask you, go back to sound, true relational psychology. What does it say about two people thriving together? And I would just ask yourselves, are we acting or working towards a place where we're going to act like that with each other? And or rather, are we getting caught up in all these milestones? Because I do just, that's the whole point of this identity thing is, what are we doing? Are we trying to win some sort of betrayal recovery contest here or something? Or are we just two complex human beings who are doing the best we can? I think we just lose sight of what life is all about. And I think we just get too caught up in the stuff. And again, I would just ask yourself, if that's where you're going to be, I don't know, I would really just reset and ask, is this thing going to work? And again, at any point in time, you guys could just stop and switch course. It's kind of like Tyler said. I mean, Tyler, I had the same moment with my wife, that light bulb moment where we just decided, let's just come together. I'm tired of hating each other. I'm tired of worrying. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of, I'm just tired of it. And we just made this decision, like, let's just be a couple again. I'm tired of this. Now, for everybody listening, that was at year 3.4. So just so everybody understands, it was not like she did that like at month 2. That was, she had to see me try and try and try and try and try. But then one day I saw her trying, she saw me trying, and was like, what are we doing? We just fall in love again. And that was that. So then things just kind of took a different direction. So Tyler, what would you leave the couples with today?
Roland, I want to say that a lot of people listening to what you just said probably had a hard time hearing that, but I think there's a lot of truth in what you said there, and there's a process involved in getting there. But yes, I agree with you 100%. The thing that I would probably add is, to anyone listening right now, you might be in a spot where you relate to being in that really dark place. There is a way out of it, and the way out of it is to take ownership for your own life. And that ownership for your own life is a process of uncovering and accepting the actual truth of who you are, and then manifesting the truth of who you are into the world. And the people who see you and are meant to be with you will stay, and the people who aren't will have to move. But there's happiness in uncovering the truth about who you are and liking what you see in the mirror. And if you do that, that's the best shot you have for whatever relationship you're in.
Yeah, so well said. So well said. And I do want to put a little asterisk on. I would say, for the younger couples listening to this who are in their first year, first 6 months, a lot of what was said was probably hard to hear today, because, it really, when we're talking about identity, we are kind of speaking a little bit more to an advanced couple through this, right? This is the couple who's, 8+ per year plus into this, maybe even more than that, where you're stuck in this. Hey, why am I not feeling better? Why are these milestones not being reached? What's so broken about our relationship? What's so broken about our husband? So I appreciate you saying that, Tyler, because I do want to add a little shout out to the couples earlier on in this process. That the beginning of this is brutal, and you have every right to express yourself and be heard, and take your time, making the decision on, can I forgive? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like I know everything? I do want to validate all of the scary freaking questions. And if your husband is not in freaking good recovery, yeah, he needs to go get talked to by somebody and be like, bro, you need to like there's ownership to take in here. So I do want to just put a little plug in there for everybody who's still in the quagmire, because again, we were definitely speaking to people who fought the good fight. And there's definitely a process in the beginning for both people. It's hard for the partners to let go of the ugliness of this, and put it into a place of healing. It is really hard. And hats off to you. I can't say I would do the same in the flip situation. I might take this to the grave and be mad until the end, I really would. And then for the guys, I empathize with the guys having a hard time letting go of control, letting go of competition. A lot of guys are like, oh, I'm not going to take a loss. I've heard that before. And guys, that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. So I appreciate you saying that, Tyler. I would do when I just, empathize with the people in the beginning of this. And I'm sure all the advanced couples listening remember what those months were like. There's a lot of tenderness that has to happen in there. And again, I hope that Tyler and I hope that what the earlier couples can take from this is not necessarily we're telling you guys to do anything differently right now. What we're trying to say is keep this in mind for as you guys are marching along the recovery journey, so that you don't stay in a stuck place, a divided place where you guys are enemies for a day longer than you absolutely need to, right? And the day that you're ready to stop being enemies and hurt together, I would really encourage you to do that, because, my wife and I were pinned against each other for a little too long. And I regret that, because we kind of dug at least on my end, we dug a whole new hole to crawl out of, as if we didn't need any more pain to recover from. Tyler, any last thoughts before we end?
No, man. Thanks for having me come on here today. I love the work you're doing. I love your willingness to step into some pretty hard places where it's hard to hit the topics that you're hitting day in and day out. And I think you're doing a great job in this world, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to be careful. It's tough, right? Because I mean, we all have, myself included, we all have our worldviews. And so while we're touching on topics, and I'm really scared to touch on these topics because a lot of the time I'm the only one touching on the topic, even though the couples are all feeling it. And I'm sad that I'm the only one, because I'll tell you what, I'm not that smart of a guy, and I don't, I'd love for some other opinions to be in here, because this is a big thing. It's hard in the pain of all of this to advocate, right? It's hard to push for moving on. Dare you ever say it to a betrayed partner, right? Moving on is the last thing they want to hear, because this is going to haunt them for the rest of their life. And I think, it's tough. So I hope everybody heard that this is, this is a hard thing to talk about, and Tyler and I both honor the pain of this. In no way are we playing any of that down. We understand the struggle. We understand why the identities form the way they form. So last thing, of course, Tyler, if couples are going to work with you, how do they do it? Do you guys work with men, couples, betrayed partners? Talk to us a little bit about your offerings and where they can find you guys.
Yeah, we have a platform called Reclaim Your Heart. And the best way to just kind of find everything is therapybrothers.org/successful addict. It'll link you straight to Roland. It'll show a picture of him and everything he's got going on. And it'll have a couple of our episodes that tie to his messaging, and you guys can start there.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Guys, check out the podcast. It's tons of good stuff. Like I said, it's not necessarily a sex addiction podcast, definitely an infidelity driven podcast, but yeah, really good stuff. How I discovered you guys was actually early in my recovery. Like somebody texted me, an episode, cause they heard me, and I had a lot of the feelings that I have today. And they said, hey, check out what these guys are kind of talking about, the dynamic. And so if you guys kind of want a different approach and a different flavor to this, Tyler and his brother have a really neat podcast for that. So Tyler, thanks for coming on today. This was awesome, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much.